legit,
Yeah.
like what happened to their communities. Like their communities were also colonized by other Europeans, so they have like kind of like this drought of culture, and so they either become obsessed with Native American culture, they become obsessed with South Asian culture, anything to satisfy their spirituality, and it's because they're so spiritually hungry for a deep connection to Mother Earth. Like when you haven't seen your mother for ages, you're gonna any sight of her is gonna just make you cry, you know. And so I always encourage people to look back into how their ancestors were connected to Mother Earth and reconnect, And if your ancestors never were connected, learn to connect without trying to appropriate our communities.
Bienvenidos, compañeros. Welcome to another episode of Unidos. Today is a special day as we are going over the indigenous oppression within the Americas. Joining us today, we have Neoputa, aka Joey. You know him, you love him. For the first time on Unidos, we are privileged to have DJ Indian, formerly of a tribe called Red. Usually Unidos, the purpose is to try to figure out ways we can unite different marginalized groups within the left, combine our voices so that, because it's going to be on our backs, that any sort of change, any sort of revolution is going to stem from. Over the last 2 years, the efforts of First Nations peoples throughout the Americas has come to a head yet again. South American uprisings in Nicaragua, Ecuador, Chile, Bolivia, and Colombia. In North America, the Sioux, Ojibwe, Meskwaki, and Choctaw nations are having their sovereignty challenged with racist and ecologically destructive pipeline expansions. I'm just kind of going to pass it along here to you guys, and just remind you what the topics of today are, which is, talking about the oppression of indigenous peoples throughout the Americas, the repression of the culture, and the different ways that you guys or that your peoples have engaged in fighting back.
Yeah. The downfall of the human species is empirical forces forcing indigenous people to compare our resources to currency. Right? We know the true value of our resources, and it's not money. And we need to go back to that. My people have prophesized like this moment, and you bring up like the colonial election and in the US, and like my people said that we're going to come, like white people, the people of the light-skinned race are going to come to two paths, and one is going to be burnt and jagged, and walking on it will cut their feet, and the other is going to be luscious and green. And the people of the light-skinned race are going to choose either. They're actually going to turn back and try and figure out like the old ways, which is what I think like we all need to be doing. Right? Like I think it's crazy to think like we're living in this prophecy right now, but it really feels like that.
Is there any hope currently with the way that things have been going? With because I understand that at the start, whenever there is like a push for resistance, obviously that's when we start seeing like the most violence taking place, like against the people who have had enough. But I mean, like, do you feel like there's hope on the horizon that there will be change?
I guess I could jump in there. You're asking about the in the developed countries or the developed. Yeah. I mean, like to be honest, like I've been following what's been happening with the Wet'suwet'en struggle over the last week for sure, and I did like I don't usually stream like for those who don't know, aloha, I'm Silver Spook. I'm also I'm a Native Hawaiian activist, Kia'i protector of Mauna Kea. Well, for one, we defeated a $1.4 billion capitalist corporate project, international project between one of the richest people on the planet, Gordon Moore, CEO of Intel, Justin Trudeau. So we already beat Justin Trudeau in Hawaii. So Bring it, motherfucker. If you want to know how to win, that's why I'm incredible. I'm like, to be honest, I am more hopeful. Obviously, we are in there's very difficult, critical junctures right now, and there's a lot that we need to do, and we're all going to hurt one way or the other, given how far colonization, capitalism, and these kind of the crushing of the indigenous people and the planet and all people. It's going to be hard, but if you're feeling hopeless, without firing a single bullet, we have kicked their motherfucking asses off of the mountain. They are running scared. They don't know what to do. The capitalists who control, remember, the military and police are all working class. These are all the working class. And what we have to do is we have to unite the planet against the 0.001%. But the Wet'suwet'en struggle, just to bring it up, the Wet'suwet'en struggle is the class, the war for the planet, the war for the soul of the environment, and the soul of humanity is right now. That's a major thing. So I've been trying to keep abreast of that. And let me tell you, 4 Vancouver ports have been shut down. The Mohawk have shut down like 3 different sites on the rail. This is choking out the capitalist infrastructure. $270 billion goes through Vancouver. Hundreds of billions of dollars comes through Montreal and Toronto. You shut all of that down. You're starting to choke out the so-called superpower of international capitalism. So anyway, that's where I'm like, let's go, motherfucker. We already won here. All we got to do is win in Canada, win in the United States, and win everywhere else. Bring your fucking bombs. Anyway, that's
it's a shame there's an ocean between between you and the mainland here.
We got to get organized on feeding ourselves, on making sure we're healthy, on making sure we're housed. And I think it starts like personally, and then you start moving out, right? Like you got to start with yourself. And then, so I'm working on myself. I have a farm. I'm trying to figure that out, try to figure out how much I can give away again. Like I want to grow food for breakfast for children. I'm also trying to figure out how to give like the wealth of knowledge away. So I've been going to my community and like reading these Jesuit diaries to show like we had this beautiful culture. Yeah, and it's in doing these things, I think, like indigenizing our measurements of wealth and indigenizing our values again, right? Like doing things for the better of the community instead of just for money. That's what we need to start moving towards.
In terms of like hope, coming from me, at least in the Andean perspective, I talked about this before, but there's a prophecy that we have every 500 years is like a rebirth type thing. So when the Spanish came, that was the 500 mark, right? It was the time of that the Andean Empire is gonna fall, kind of like a catastrophe type thing. And then now we're at the new 500 mark, and we had Evo Morales be the president, and he was kind of seen as like the chosen one for a lot of communities because he was an Andean person who managed to become president of a country full of mestizos and white Latinos. And so a lot of communities saw him as kind of like the representation of the chosen one, of like, oh, look, Andean people, we will rise again because it's the birth of the 500 years. Now, to me, that hasn't ended. We're seeing a rise of Andean languages, because, again, of Evo Morales' policies. We saw a rise of Aymara being spoken in communities that the language was either dead or was going extinct, and now they're speaking it, they're reclaiming it. And we're seeing little things like that happening throughout South America. And Ecuador, I think a perfect example, a modern example, Ecuador, where when the IMF was trying to take control in Ecuador, and the Runa people were like, no, we're not going to let this happen. This is our land. This is our ancestral land. And you have to come through us. And so they protested, they organized, and they won. The IMF is not there. And Ecuador is kind of like a beacon of like, yeah, like we're here and you can't remove us because we're the first people and we know our land more than anyone here. Chile and Argentina, with the rise of the Mapuche nation, even mestizos are kind of joining forces with the Mapuches, which historically mestizos have kind of abandoned indigenous people, despite having native blood and whatever that looks like. They have abandoned native people for an upper rank in the caste system of racial categories. And so throughout South America, we're seeing a rise of Native people, and because of social media, people can't ignore us anymore. We're constantly facing invisibility. I think that's something that Native people throughout the Americas face, invisibility. We're always invisible amongst in society, right? Our issues are never mainstream or very rarely mainstream. However, when they were trying to build a telescope in Hawaii, when Standing Rock happened, or when IMF, Colombia, etc., all these things happened, it went mainstream. Those issues, so much so that even Bernie Sanders and other people running for presidencies commented on these things. And so for me, there's a lot of hope, because people can't just ignore the first people anymore, because we're not allowing it. And before we didn't allow it, we tried as much as possible to be in the mainstream. However, now there's people who are more sympathetic to us, who now started seeing us as human, or at least the children of races or settlers started actually humanizing us, because they themselves can no longer deal with the guilt of what their ancestors have been doing.
What are some ideas? I guess, because Silver Spook, you have. I always like to throw this to you, because you guys had six, I like throwing it to victories that are recent, that we can directly learn from, right? And so I know that you attribute a lot of that proper recognition to having Jason Momoa and Dwayne Johnson and different things here and there. I know also the viral, or not viral, but having the entire world participate in a live dance, or ceremony on the internet, that sort of thing. Really helped bring that recognition to that led to your victory. And then DJ Endon and Joey, whatever you guys think to add to how do we spread this message, and how do we get the recognition to be more than just a flash in the pan, something more than just a quick spectacle, and then have it just kind of fizzle out.
Well, I mean, just to say what I think. Let me just say first of all that the first attempt to build the TMT 30, it's a 1.4 again, it's a 1.4 billion dollar it's a 1.4 billion dollar international corporation corporate project is being engaged on, being worked on by Silicon Valley billionaires, Trudeau, 30 universities. So it's a massive project. And it has been stopped since 2015. Technically, the first attempt to build it was in 2015. It was stopped then. They came back with much stronger force, like I said, in July 17th, 2019. It's been 6 months now. So so I'm not going to go again. I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but in terms of how we won, it's every struggle, specific struggles, whether that's a pipeline, the DAPL, Ihu Mateo, which is in Conquest of Dreads. Shout out for Conquest of Dread in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's a colonizer name. Anyways, but here, our specific circumstances have helped for sure. The like I said, Hawaii's people are recognizing this, and I'm glad that I saw in a lot of the documents talking about the Vancouver ports, talking about the occupations of the capital. At the end of the day, right? You want to we have people, right? We have 99.9% of people who, if they don't realize it, if they do or don't realize it, it's only a matter of time. I think the capitalist and the colonizer weapon. Capitalism is a disinformation system. It needs to diseducate and disinform as many of the 99% of people who it is hurting. Whenever you fight a war, it kills people in when you fight a war, it kills 3 million people in the Middle East, and then it kills millions of Americans because they don't have any health care, right? Every hot war, I was talking about capitalism as it's like fighting capitalism and colonialism is like fighting a fire demon, right? And when you fight a hot war, you're fighting the fire demon with a super soaker full of gasoline. Right? You're killing yourself and you're killing them. And that the people who have been convinced, the Americans who have convinced that they need to defend their country by killing people there and killing their soul and killing their PTSD and killing their entire country with $21 trillion of losses is capitalism and colonialism. That's or whatever you want to call it, the demon winning, right? The more people that understand that we are in a class war, we are in a decolonization war. So it's just really a number of how many people are on that side. So when we engage here, the goal always, right? That's why we don't engage. That's why we engage in Kapu Aloha, which basically means we're in nonviolent peaceful protest on that mountain. Because if like you were saying, and it's correct. If you engage the fire demon with weapons, oh well, you're just one of those savages. We're gonna wipe you out, like we did the last 1,000 years. So you can't engage it that way. You have to engage it in peace. At the same time, it is still warfare. It is, and when you're fighting the current reigning champion of the colonizer is capitalism. It was feudalism, slavery in the South. Now it's capitalism. When you want to fight capitalism, what is the blood in the veins? What flows through the veins of the capitalism demon? Right? It's money. How do you hurt if you really want to hurt in the long term? You get optics, you get visibility. Jason Momoa, that helps. I think actually we would have won without Jason Momoa and The Rock. Though that definitely helps, and it increases how far you can push back. But what really stops it is damage to the capitalist class, which is losses on their books, right? That means $67 billion of tourism that's being threatened by slowdowns, shutdowns, hotels not longer operating, airports, right? Highways. There's only one highway in and out from Honolulu airport. There's only one airport that takes 12 million people. This is 12 million people come through that airport to Waikiki to stay in a $2,000 hotel. Ritz-Carlton is Donald Trump's. Goldman Sachs have Turtle Bay. Mitt Romney and the Republicans have all the Marriott hotels. So all of that $67 billion, if you threaten to shut that down or you shut it down, you're damaging all of those capitalists. And they're going to ask themselves, so what you want to do is you want to weaponize, to me, I mean, they're going to go, governor of the colonizer state of Hawaii, that's illegal occupying Hawaii, your $1.4 billion telescope, I don't give a shit. Yeah, I know they bought you off for $3 million, but we don't want to lose $67 billion. So I'm not going to pull your puppet string next year and donate to your campaign unless you pull the goddamn cost off of that mountain, because I don't want to lose any more of my money. So that's the question, is like, how much can you damage the capitalist class? Because they're not going to stop because they hurt, they're not going to stop. The only question for them when you try to fight, I mean, you need to do your due diligence. Have your Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, which we have to bail ourselves out. We attempted to fight this in the court, right? We fought it in the court. We said, this is illegal. What you're doing, you have no permit. You have no right to build this telescope on unceded Hawaiian territory, which with the state of Hawaii, I mean, the entire thing is illegal in international law because there's no treaty for all of Hawaii. B, even in your own state law, you gave us this territory and you're legally building it. In fact, many of the telescopes have been built with no permit, and then they retroactively permit it. So you do your due diligence to win the 99% over, to say, look, we tried to fight it in the courts. We tried to be reasonable, but the colonizer is just breaking their own freaking law, just like Trudeau and John Horgan and all of Canada is state, federal, and international law, right? United States commits 10,000 war crimes per day. Okay, but the 99% don't get that, right? That's how they get you to go murder yourself and Iraqis, right? But the more people that get it, right? That's the power of the internet and Instagram. That's the real power, is you can get more people informed, and to stop fighting the fire demon with gasoline and start fighting it with water. In a certain sense, like fighting it with like mass. You have to fight capitalism by stopping the capitalists from making money. You stop the port from importing $270 billion of cheap Chilean slave mine copper and fucking Bolivian lithium at the back of a fascist coup, assembled in a Chinese factory in an iPhone. That the iPhones are going to have to go through a ship that's going to park in Vancouver, and it's going to be on a train going into Montreal. So all the people's going, I can't get my freaking iPhone 12 today. Oh shit. And Apple's going, oh fuck, I'm losing money because I can't sell iPhones. That's how you hit the capitalist class. And you have to get as many people on your side. So anyway, you target. Anyway, I'll stop soon because I'm going on for a long time. But the Mohawks, just another. I mean, you want to target the capital as much as you can and not hit the people. So, for example, the Mohawk. I don't want to speak for them, but I mean, they let the passengers through on that freight train, but they stopped the freight. Right, so you want to you don't want to hurt the people. But you want to damage the capital. So all of those iPhones, all those Baby Yoda T-shirts, all the Mr. Peanut hats, all the fucking Funko Pops for Darth Vader, all the Witcher video games, they can't get through. So, but all of the people get through. When you have buses that let the Japanese, you bring up the Japanese action where the bus drivers are giving away free rides. Hospitals giving free treatment. You damage the pharmaceutical company, but you help the people, right? Amazon's factory shut down in France by the electrical company. Somebody said like, oh, but if you shut electricity, if you have an electricity strike, we're going to like damage and we're going to kill people because hospitals won't be able to function. Well, you have a targeted blackout of Amazon, targeted blackout of Macron's government, right? So, and that's, I don't know. Anyway, so I'm going on for a long time, but if you want to hurt it, that's how you do it. And also you do everything that DJ Indian was saying. You have to build our post-capitalist cultures and dual power structures.
Joey and DJ, do you guys have any perspective or suggestions as far as helping the message stick to everyday people, so that the struggle is actually with them for longer than just like a headline in a newspaper or just like a Facebook post? How do we, because that's how in my opinion, from just like looking at shit from the past, that's the way that change happens, right? It's the continued help and support over long periods of time that actually helps us achieve some sort of victory.
Something that I've only recently noticed that is a really effective tool is sharing language. When I've been sharing language, especially about like North America, a lot of people seem to be extremely interested out of nowhere. This tweet I sent out went viral with like over 125,000 likes on it, and all I did was list 26 state names and said that these were all indigenous words, and people didn't know that. Right, a lot of people don't know that more than half of the state names are named after indigenous words. Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, those are 3 indigenous words. Not a lot of people know what those words mean or what languages they're even in. Toronto, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Saskatoon, like they're Quebec. These are all indigenous words. And when I've been sharing what they mean, a lot of people have been it really piques their interest, because it for the first time, they realize how disconnected they are. Like they call themselves proud Canadians without knowing what that word Canada means or even what language it's in. And when they realize that, they get really interested in what you have to say. And I've given talks about the importance of our language and especially like settlers need to learn this language. Like everyone needs to learn the languages of where you're at. The traditional languages of where you're living will explain things in an in-depth that no other language can, simply because they haven't put in the time that we have as indigenous people on our land. Right? If you want to know how things work on Lake Nipissing, learn my Nipissing dialect of Anishinaabe, and you'll learn it's an instruction manual. And what's crazy is like we were called sorcerers. The Nipissing specifically, the Jesuits described us as sorcerers. But what we weren't sorcerers. They just didn't understand what they were looking at, right? Like they would show up and they'd have like a sickness. They'd have, I don't know, boils or something and on their neck. And then we'd look around and grab a plant and put it on their neck and their boils would be gone. And they're like, whoa, that was magic. It's like, no, we just used the boil on the neck plant. Right. And that's what the word is for us. You know what I mean? And like our languages do this. Like they give an explanation on things that like is so in depth because we've been observing scientifically for thousands upon thousands of years. And the colonial method of observation is only a few hundred years old. So like if you could imagine how jazzed like white scientists would be if we had an elder who spoke like ancient Aramaic in a way that they understood the concepts and all, like we have that. We have like my elders meet every Wednesday in a church basement, and the languages that they're speaking is thousands upon thousands of years old, and it holds that knowledge that like not a lot of people understand. So it's yeah, what I've been noticing and getting settlers at least like finally interested in something is showing how disconnected they are from the land with language. And people have been asking right away, okay, how do we help? How do I get language classes? How do I hire language speakers? And I feel like it might be like a small step right now, but I think it'll have huge waves, because I know how much learning the language that I've been learning has only been like about 2 or 3 years. I've been on this language reclamation, and it shifted everything I understand as foundation to its core. And when I explain some of the words in Anishinaabe, when you see people's like understanding completely shift, right? Your language is your taproot of thought. And we had entire philosophies, as Aylan over here who's commenting. I just spent a week with her on their place back home. She's a cousin of mine. So yeah, and we were just super jazzed on language and learning stuff. And I was reading things from the Jesuit diaries that were discussing how in 1640 we had ballets and operas and all these beautiful things that were so cultural. And like growing up thinking that you know, I was called this savage, and I was called this like this dirty thing that didn't have culture, to reading these Jesuits describing like elaborate ballets and the sounds that were so the most agreeable to music as they were describing. It's, we need to go back and learn this culture and learn our traditional ways, because they're the way to teach people how to be human beings again, right? We have words for white people, and we have words for human beings, and they're different. They're different. And the more we teach them to be human beings, the better for all human beings, right? So I know it's really scary because our language and our culture has been taken away before, but sharing and showing, and it's been a really, really effective tool for me anyways, in shifting some people's frame of mind.
I like that. That's fucking dope.
So language, it's funny that you mentioned language. And while I do agree with you, language, at least for our communities, it is kind of like a manual for the land around you, especially because, again, since our identity has to do with our literal ancestral homelands, our language is gonna follow that same philosophy, and that's very much true in south of border communities. However, we now have a tradition, and not just us, but like many communities now have a tradition of being secretive with our language, with our spirituality, a lot of things, and it's because our cultures were illegal, right? From North to South America, including Hawaii, you know,
Yep.
our cultures were illegal, you know. And in the 90s, for example, that's when in Colombia, that is when to be Indian was legalized, you know, speaking your language, participating in ceremonies. And so my generation is the first generation where we can kind of be Indian in public and not get killed. Well, I mean, outside of being like discriminative, but outside of like law enforcement, they can't just kill us for being Indian in public. And so in my community, the Colombian government would often go to our village and kill people or arrest them for speaking our language. And so everything had to be done in secret. And you saw this similar trend throughout Central and South America. And I'm sure in North America and Hawaii, everything was done on secret as well. And so there are communities who are uninviting of outsiders because of that. So, for example, right now I live in Miami, and Miami is Seminole Miccosukee territory. And they have, you know, their language is basically copyrighted. In other words, no one can learn it unless you're from the community. And even if you look online, it's very, very hard to find a textbook that will teach the language because it's very secretive, right? In fact, one of my elders who is Miccosukee got in trouble for teaching someone Miccosukee, like not even like teaching them like formally, just like teaching them a word or two, you know, and they got in trouble by the community. So it's that strict. And for us in South America, while it isn't so strict to like, you know, if I really want to, I can teach my significant other ceremonies, and they're not going to give a fuck. However, there is still those grandparents, you know, or like at least my grandparents, who are like, oh, we don't do that here, we do that behind closed doors. And so there is a tradition of keeping things secretive because settlers made it illegal. And language, a lot of Native people are scared that white people will learn our languages and use it against us. You know, data sovereignty is a big conversation happening. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to like be sensitive to the idea that our there was culture bans, right? And like speaking the language would get you beat. Like the reason I don't know my language is because my uncles got beat at school for speaking it in class. So like I totally understand it, but I did get this teaching, if you don't mind me sharing, about our culture. Like it's like a feather, right? Our culture is this beautiful feather, and unfortunately we've had this feather like try to be snatched from our hands so much that we hold on to it so tight that it's kind of breaking up.
We need to focus on, you know, repairing what was destroyed, what was taken, you know. And so how feasible do you think reparations are, and what would reparations look like to you?
Give me the land back free of colonial damage. You know, that is what reparations look for me. Not money. Money is the cause of this. If you know, there's there's tribes that got money, some tribes, because again, this whole like Native people got reparations thing is bullshit. However, there are communities that did get money, and some of them became rich. Some rich, some tribes did get rich, and you know what they're doing? They're funding ICE detention centers in Texas. Money does that.
Yeah.
I don't want money. I want land free of colonial violence. That's what I want. And when it comes to communities across the Americas, we have to really change our morality or our perception of money, of wealth. Food, food resources, things like that is important, but and money can acquire these things. However, it's because of this capitalist system that we have right now. There was something that this Amazonian woman said, and it's like, and she said, only when the white people learn that you cannot eat money, you cannot breathe money, what truly is valuable around you. And when that happens, water is going to be the new money, and I totally butchered that quote. However, that's something that was being talked about in South America. And it's this perception of like, oh, give us money to solve our issues. Again, I see tribes being destroyed because of money.
Yeah, reparations for indigenous people will look different to reparations for other people, and yeah, I agree. And the whole campaign of land back, I think, is great. But I think Duende, you added that perfect part about having land back that hasn't been hurt by capitalism, I think is extremely important. Even again, and I keep referring back to these prophecies only because I think it's so poignant right now. But they mentioned that like we can't we'll know that the people of the light-skinned race lied to us when the rivers run with poison and the fish become unfit to eat. And when you hear things like that, like you understand that we were swindled out of the right way to live. And yeah, I agree with Duende and the idea of reparations. It can't be surrounded around money. A good like stepping stone, even I think, like in Canada, we have a really interesting situation with cannabis, right? Cannabis as a plant, it went federally legal, and all native land, all reserve land is considered federal land. So it went federally legal, and then Canada said, okay, it's up to you provinces to figure it out. But provinces don't have jurisdiction on reserve. So it's up to us to make our own rules. And yeah, it's really, really important medicine, and I understand that, but it's also building material. It's also food. It's also clothing. And we'd be able to create our own capitalism in our own way, where we can make our own currency, right? Like the same way that Bitcoin became a thing. If we all believe in it, then it works. And if we're all working on if we make up our own dollar on the community and have like white people come into our dispensaries and invest in our dollar when they buy our medicine, then we can use that dollar around the community. And whenever we get funding from an outside source, any sort of colonial currency, we just pool that and put that in account and we'll throw that at white people whenever we got to deal with them. And I see this as like a good stepping stone on the way off, because then we can build houses in like 6 months using hempcrete, right? Like and it only takes 6 months to grow less than that, like 5 months to grow an acre. So you could grow a house in 6 months as opposed to waiting for wood every year. This is just like one small avenue that I see, getting out of colonial oppression. And yeah, I understand it's like creating capitalism for ourselves, but I see it as a way of getting out. Because if we can afford to grow all of our own food and take care of all of our own food, have housing, like what I see for the future of my community is that if you're from Nipissing, you're housed and you're fed. You're having a hard time in Toronto, come home. You're housed and you're fed. Get back on your feet. Figure out what you need to do. If you need to go back to school, do that. Just we'll take care of you. That's what I think communities need to do, right? We need to measure the success of our community by how well we take care of our most vulnerable. And in doing so, I think that that's going to be the big change. If we're all mentally well and growing our own food, then we can start showing our wealth by giving food away to the white towns just outside of our communities, right? And yeah, I think this is the way out. And I know I'm repeating myself a few times over, but in getting that land as reparations, I think is a good starting point in ending a lot of colonial oppression.
The land is, in a certain sense, some senses, more important. But I also understand that it's different for every different indigenous and colonized people, what reparations would look like. Like I also definitely agree with like DJ Indian about the you know, getting the power structure, or like some people call it in the leftist space dual power structures. And like that's why I like to use the term when I'm talking to white people, indigenous anarcho-socialism, because they kind of get what those mean. And I just kind of say, like, this is the thing that we've been doing for thousands of years. You call it this thing that this Marx guy with a long beard and the other guy with the long beard, the bready Kropotkin guy, they talk about your younger people are just taking little baby steps, but we're adults in this. We've been doing this for a long time. And it's always interesting. People ask me, like, so Silver Spook, when you Native Hawaiians, when you guys do you guys have like a local Bitcoin currency? Do you guys have like any food seed bombing? I'm like, we don't need to seed bomb. We have for thousands of years been growing our food everywhere. Like literally, this area is residential / agricultural zone. So we have houses with electricity, and you know, we have cell phone. I have a snowball microphone. And we have avocados outside. There's goats down the street. Neighbor, there's a cows right there. It's like house. You know, every house has like a taro patch that can feed, like, you know, all of the luau's we need. We just say, okay, uncle, also, if we need houses, we have all of these structures is already democratically distributed. So there's like a cement mixer over there. There's a bulldozer there. So if we need to build a house, oh, who needs a house? Are you homeless in Honolulu or LA? Like the millions and millions. It's like, I think something like 70% of America is underhoused. Like millennials that 37 years old trying to have a family in mommy and daddy's attic. Like most of America is like that. Are you homeless? We just build people houses. Do you need food? Like literally, if you're driving down the street, it's like, come eat. Like I'm driving down the street like on Halloween, and like this auntie, I don't even know who they were, just like downtown Hilo, which is like in the town of the Big Island. And I'm just driving by, and they're like, "Hey, are you hungry? Come eat food. Just. I mean, I'm like, are you sure? I'm just a stranger." And they're like, no, I don't. Yeah, just come eat. We got too much food. You got to give it away. And that's how you gain prestige. Like you were saying, like Hawaiian culture is a sharing culture. You gain prestige for the li or for your family, the more you could give away. And like everyone here, like we just like gave away coconuts to our neighbor, and the other neighbor's like, hey, have some extra banana bread. We're not hurting here, and that's why we like. Also, full time here is 30 hours. So you know how much you work on Oahu, the city that's colonized? Average is like 70 to 80 plus. And if you make $103,000 working as a United Airlines aircraft engineer, you can still live in a van. I had a friend who lived in a van. Because you know what the housing price is? $850,000 for a house. You know what it is over here? You can work at Walmart and get a freaking house. So, anyway, so that's just like, I'm trying to add like a few, you know, I would agree with all those things, and that building these, like, you know, like you know, it's just like, it's just like, it's more about the values. It's about like, and obviously there are Hawaiians that have been bought off. I mean, you could call them a comprador, the compromise, the colonizer comes in, they go, okay, here's $1 million. Who wants to sell your culture out and take a picture with this mayor that we're gonna, you know, we have that guy who was literally a Hawaiian when we had our protest, a Hawaiian who was paid off by the state with these, you know, governmental associations, so they could say, oh, look, we shook hands with one of your chiefs, kind of like in the West Side. Look, we shook hands with some of these folks, and they all went and gambled in Vegas, and they sold, you know, and we had one guy, a Hawaiian, took down the first structure built on Mauna Kea for this action. He took it down himself with his own fucking hands. He better not show his face around here. He's not here anymore. Because if you don't fucking show your face there, motherfucker.
I think it's really interesting, like the fact that, you know, first of all, that you guys, I know this is a very, very small sample size, but you know, I respect that the three of you pretty much agreed on the idea of what reparations would look like to you know, First Nations people. Because yeah, like someone in chat, you know, we mentioned is a callback to what Joey said, saying that Black reparations or New African reparations would be different. But even then, I think that this concept of money being tied to this word is wrong, because, you know, reparations is just, you know, it doesn't have to be money. Money is toxic, right? And I feel like, you know, that narrative of money is what's constantly used against, you know, just once again doing something that just makes people or giving people the right to be equal again, right? Because in all actuality, it's this idea of just like, you know, like what happened, you know, the reparations, you know, when you give people like with like African people, new African people within the inner city, when you the land that they are currently occupying now, you know, if you give them access to affordable food and housing and all these things, and you know, good schooling and, you know, state programs that actually work or city programs that actually work for them, you know, they're able to, you know, how much are they going to be able to succeed, right? They're going to, you know, those are the type of reparations that a lot of these communities are calling for. And it's pretty much, and in my opinion, it's kind of the same for, you know, what you guys are asking for, where it's just like, you know, give us our land back and let us succeed. Let us treat us as equals. And you know, I just respect that you guys all carried pretty much like the same message. So that's awesome, where once again it's getting it's separating the word reparations away from money. Do you see, you know, within your community, do you see, you know, more people that are trying to exploit or fall down an exploitive path, or do you see a return to the tradition, or you know, seeing a desire to move back towards a more traditional sense like of community?
Right. We're definitely making a move towards a more traditional way. Our chief actually put a moratorium on fishing, and we're a fishing community. It's on a huge lake, Nipissing. That's a huge industry, both for indigenous and non-indigenous people. And we put a moratorium on like fishing, net fishing. And a lot of people were upset, both indigenous and non-indigenous people. And our chief held fast, and it's been, I think, 3 or 4 years, and the fish population is back. Like that's we did what we were supposed to do, and it worked, and we brought that population back up. So yeah, these traditional teachings and putting a stop on like making money for a bit for the health of the lake. Our leadership did that, you know. So we are going trying to step away from a lot of capitalism. And you know, it's not to say like we're not investing in doing a lot of things with money, but you know, I'm proud of my community for doing that.
Silver Spook, since your guys' victory, do you see a stronger pull back to, you know, the unity of indigenous of, you know, the indigenous people, or, you know, do you see people just kind of being like, okay, we did it, and then just going back to business as usual?
People have finally started to come together. They are coming together. The Native Hawaiians are building massive movements. There, again, 10 to 20% of Hawaii participate. I estimated like all of the protests: Waikiki, Oahu, Big Island, Molokai, Kauai, Maui, all the islands. There's massive protests, solidarity protests, and strike and walkout actions in solidarity with the Mauna Kea. And altogether, there's like over 100,000 people. That is 1.4 million people. There's approximately 10 to 20% of the entire population of Hawaii was participating in this. That's what scared the shit out of the colonizer, right? When was the last time America had 60 million Americans do anything other than watch a fucking Super Bowl with Mr. Peanut, right? Commercials. When was the last time you did anything? That is what is reawakening here. And people who, the white, they always have like, you know, people from white cultures are coming in and crying, and they're like, I wish I had something to connect back to. I want to support you in any way that I can. I love Hawaii, and Hawaii has many other weapons. 7 billion people around the planet know Hawaii because Blue Hawaii, 51st dates, fucking, Hawaii 5-0, and you know, we have something that the Wet'suwet'en don't have. We have the international resort vacation center of 300 million Americans. Oh God, I had my wedding was there and I had a beautiful honeymoon.
You know, people of color, you know, like we're forced to adapt, right? Like we have to, you know, if we fight back against, like if we physically fight back or we do anything that's quote unquote violent, we are labeled, you know, it's like, oh, you know, you're just more, predetermined to make violent decisions because you're, a hot-blooded, Mexican, or, you guys are just savages, like these sorts of things. So it's like you're almost always forced in a position to be to hold this non-violent stance. And I brought this up the first night that we were talking about on Lottie's stream, when we were talking about the Wet'suwet'en invasion, where they're forced to stand there and take it. And one of the privileges that white leftists have, or white activists have, is they can stand up to a cop without necessarily dealing with the same repercussions that somebody living on that land, or a person of color, would receive. The way that the state, the way that the authority treats a white passing, or even a white person, is way different than what they'll treat somebody that looks like like Joey, or Silver Spook, or DJ Indian, or what have you. So so your guys' take on this non-violent war, at what point is enough going to be enough? Or, at what point do you say like enough is enough? Because I know I saw that video of like the car being driven through, I think it was at Saskatchewan, where a car drove through protesters, and to me, like that, it just fills me with rage, because it's just like one of these things where, once again, like, how do you define violence? Violence for the state is stopping the production of an oil pipeline so that they can gain more capital. You know what I mean? That's violence. But meanwhile, the person who ran through those protesters, I don't even know if he was caught. I haven't heard any updates on that. You know what I'm saying? Like these individuals who, and then the police, or then the military, when they're forced to go in, nobody holds them accountable when this is all said and done. So it's just kind of like, at what point is enough? And, what's your guys' take on that level? Do you guys kind of see it more as like a, we always need to kind of stand there and be the bigger person? Or is there ever a time where, we need to match their definitions of violence?
Obviously there's going to, and I'm not saying like Wet'suwet'en wasn't pushed to anything. Like it's this is all connected, eh? And on top of it, knowing that there was an injunction on the Tandanega Mohawk people to move their blockade by the CN Rail, and the RCMP actually said or the OPP said they're not going to enforce that injunction, knowing quite possibly it could get to some violence. Going back to the Ganasatage resistance in the 1990s. This isn't new, right? Wet'suwet'en, Unistoten, like they same thing happened to Unistoten a few years ago. Then you have Oka. Then you have like this happened in Canada time and time again, and we're starting to see that pattern, but we're starting to get organized, right? Like we had Idle No More, which was an incredible hashtag. We have Missing and Murdered Women, which is an incredible hashtag, and I feel like these hashtags are also a really good way of not just spreading ideas, but mourning with each other at the same time. Like when Colton Bushi, which is its 2-year anniversary of Stanley, of Gerald Stanley getting acquitted for the murder of Colton Bushi. That was 2 years ago today. It gives us something to rally behind and mourn. And the more we see, like, they don't care for us. They don't like us. They actually hate us, and we're in the way of stuff. We need to start loving ourselves as much as they hate us, and we need to start taking care of ourselves as much as they're not taking care of us. And I don't know if this answered your question or not, but it's
I mean, that's
yeah,
I mean, so
that's where
far,
I'm
I
at.
mean, no, I mean, like that makes a lot of sense.
My perspective is this: native racism is so normalized in this continent, from North to South America to Hawaii to all the Polynesian islands. To be honest, you know, Hawaii. If we look at Hawaii, it's the only place in the Americas. And I hate calling it the Americas, but in the Americas that native people are the most in prison. You know, everywhere else is black folks. However, Hawaii, it's the native Hawaiians that are mostly in prison. They're gonna think we're savages regardless. They're gonna call us Indians. They're gonna call us Indios, at least in Latin America, because to them we're always gonna be less than human. We can be peaceful. They'll call us savages. I mean, in Bolivia, for example, Gina Añez called us savages recently, and so savages got was trending for Andean people on Twitter because they're just calling us savages for being political. In other words, for being involved in politics, for being involved in the politics that they designed. You know, we're being called savages just because we don't agree with them. You know, they're gonna call us ignorant no matter what. They're gonna call us violent no matter what. So I less care about how they're gonna perceive us, because no matter what, they're gonna dehumanize us. You know, I always make a joke with my native friends, like, "Are you even native unless there's a local sports team with your community name?" Because it's true. Like, you know, they dehumanize us in so many ways that I'm over it. I'm just like, you know what? They're gonna call us savages. They're gonna call us ignorant. I'm less interested in how they perceive us, because I already know how they perceive us, and my parents know how they perceive us, and my grandparents know how they perceive us. My ancestors died knowing how they perceived us, and that hasn't changed. And so, you know, I'll leave with this quote that I have pinned on my profile, and I say this as much as possible just for people to kind of get what we're fighting here. But they kill us if we keep quiet, and they kill us when we speak out. Therefore, we will speak out. And that was indigenous leader Cristina Bautista from Pueblo Nasa in Colombia, and she was assassinated that same day. You know, in other words, we're gonna be killed if we speak out. We're gonna be killed if we're quiet. So why not speak out? If that means violence, if that means non-violence, whatever the community wants, that's what it is. And we can be non-violent. They're gonna perceive us as violent anyway. And that's what happened in Hawaii. You know, they say that Hawaiians are violent. They're ignorant savages. Oh my God, they don't want science. You know, the way media demonizes Native people is laughable, because it's the same shit since 1492.
For sure, yeah. No, they're always going to attempt to paint you, the governor of the illegally occupying United States Empire of State of Hawaii, David Ige, settler colonial bought off guy, said the Hawaiians on Mauna Kea, this is like the 2 days after the protest started, the Hawaiians on Mauna Kea are not doing a protest. They are partying. There is drug paraphernalia. There's feces and urine all over their mountain. This mountain that they claim to care so much, their sacred mountain. They're you know, everything short of, it's all coded. Basically, you locals means you bunch of savages is what it means. You N-words of the Pacific. They used to just say that outright in 1890. Now they code it, you know. But he basically was saying, you guys aren't protesting anything. You don't actually practice any of your culture. You got a cell phone. You're driving on our roads, right? You can't be Hawaiian if you drive on a road with a cell phone. That's white shit. I mean, that's why I say human technology, right? That's what they want to paint you. They want to paint you into a little corner of, oh, you want to be Hawaiian? Okay, we'll go back into a little museum village, do a little fish pond, and no phone, no electricity. You have to live like you were in 1690, you know, or before the Spaniards and the whalers, and then the British and Americans showed up and colonized you. What they forget is that the Hawaiian, the Kingdom of Hawaii, which had a constitutional republic, the final queen of Hawaii was a communist, and actually practiced communism and socialism before, when Americans were still flopping around murdering their unions with the Pinkertons. We actually she was fighting for women's suffrage, or equal pay for women 50 years before Americans attempted to give women the vote. And also Hawaiians had the highest literacy rate on the planet. Bilingual, included in Hawaiian and English and several other languages. They were meeting with Persian, what was then Iranian, royalty, and they're trying to get international recognition. Kalakaua, one of the final kings of Hawaii, went to Japan and was trying to build an international solidarity to have recognition and parity with the white colonial nations. That's why this flag has a Union Jack in it. Not because we love Britain, but because that's how you survive and not turn into a little colony, crushed, enslaved people, which Hawaiians have succeeded in doing. We were the most educated civilization on the planet. Outside of Scotland, good job, Scotland getting out of that collapsing empire called Britain, because they know where it's at. So it's only the Scottish. We had the highest literacy rate. We had electric lights inside of Iolani Palace before the White House of the so-called civilized empire. That's actually a lawless barbarian state called the United States. And so, they're going to paint you as these little savages. Oh, you can't be Hawaiian unless you go back into Lo'i. So give us all the power, give us all the technology so we can keep you off and quartered off into your little reservation in Waimana, in the most horrible, nothing grows, the driest areas of Waianae, the ghettos where I am, the industrial New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey of Honolulu, of Hawaii, Oahu, called Kalihi Valley, right? That's where I'm from. Or you get the crappiest land way the hell out there where you can't grow anything, where you can't practice your culture. And what Hawaiians are saying is no, actually there's this other history. We were the freaking real actual Wakanda. We actually had an advanced technological civilization that is also respecting of the earth, of human beings, of human labor.
I just want to say, thank you guys for coming on here and talking through this. I really think that the fact that within the last 20 years, that hearing that the languages have been legalized again, it feels weird to me to say that, but it is the reality that we live in, where you're forbidden to speak your language, and the dilution of your culture and the appropriation of your culture for let's say Halloween costumes or for political gain. You're now finally able to call people out on that sort of shit, and be able to stand your ground and be visible again. And the fact that we're seeing the benefits of that, because once again, that's another thing that you guys are all agreeing with, is that's leading, that the ability to be visible is leading to a resurgence of your culture again, which ties back to there being a kernel of hope, that things are getting better. I only wish that we have enough time to fully see the fruits of that.
I didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
One comrade that was supposed to join us today was Aliakai. Unfortunately, she had other obligations, but she did want me to read something. They don't care about us, and they never will. This system of blood quantum and pedigree they use to judge us is proof of that. We are not defined by culture to this day, but by blood. And I have never met a tribe that thought this way prior to the white invasion. They've defined not only where we live, but who we are. It's the most vicious form of violence, once termed kill the Indian to save the man.